Welcome to today's clip, which is all about volcanoes. We're going to be having a look at the different types of volcanoes, which comes up in the Hazardous Earth section of the exam. We're going to have a look at how this links to the specification. We're going to have a look at some of the different types of volcanoes, how they're formed and their characteristics. And then we're going to have a look at an exam question and apply the knowledge from the clip. So first of all, let's have a look at our exam link here. So you need to be able to know the causes of contrasting volcanic hazards. You need to know the volcano types, magma types, lava flows, and explosivity. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a look at two different types of volcanoes here. So the first one is a composite volcano, and the second one is a shield volcano. We're going to focus on these individually first, and then we're going to have a look at comparing these two different types and how we could be assessed in an exam question. So first of all, let's focus on our composite volcano. So you can see in this image here, we have an example of a composite volcano. Composite volcanoes are found along convergent plate boundaries. On your convergent plate boundaries, your plates are moving towards each other. So this happens when you have an oceanic plate moving towards a continental plate. Your oceanic plate will be subducted below your continental plate, melting, and when the lava rises to the surface, you have a composite volcano being formed. So these eruptions are very, very explosive, as you can see from the image here. They are really violent, really strong eruptions that cause a lot of damage. And when these eruptions take place, they tend to create a cone-shaped volcano. So you can see that here. If we trace around the outline of this volcano, you have really steep sides and a very high top. This is because the lava is really, really powerful and is really, really thick. So what happens here is when your lava erupts, it doesn't travel very far down the volcano before it solidifies. So gradually, over time, this lava builds up and you have layers of ash and lava being created, giving it this cone shape. However, these eruptions are very infrequent, so they don't happen very often. So when they do, they are powerful, but they don't take place very often. When we look at our shield volcano, in comparison, these volcanoes are much flatter, as you can see from this image here. And sometimes they barely stick out from the landscape around them. So that's why they're called a shield volcano, because they look just like a shield which has been turned upside down. They have a much wider base, and they are much smaller in height. As you can see here, the lava is much more runny, much more sticky, and it travels much further distances down from your volcano, which is why we have this much flatter shape. The eruptions are very gentle, so they're not very powerful, they're not very dangerous. However, they occur very often, and the reason for that is because they are found on our divergent plate boundaries. So what do we mean by divergent? So divergent is where you have two different plates that are moving in opposite directions. And because they're moving in opposite directions, your lava is just constantly seeping through this gap in the plates. So that's why we have these frequent eruptions that are continuously taking place, gradually building up these flat volcanoes over a long period of time. So let's have a quick overview, a quick look at the difference between these two volcanoes then. So our composite, as we can see, we've got our image here compared to our image here with our shield. The eruptions are much more dangerous. They are much more explosive and violent. Composite volcanoes aren't very frequent. You're going to be waiting a long time for your eruptions to take place. And that's because at your convergent plate boundaries, the pressure builds up and builds up and builds up until eventually your volcanoes can erupt. This sometimes can take hundreds and hundreds of years. compared to our shield volcanoes, where our eruptions are regularly taking place, which could take place every year, every couple of years. So it's a lot more frequent because these plates are constantly moving apart, allowing your lava to seep through. The middle. Our shape. So our composite volcanoes are much steeper with our cone shape compared to our much flatter shield volcanoes. So remember, this is due to our lava. So the shield volcano, the lava is much more runny. It flows much further away from your volcano, creating this much flatter shield-like shape, compared to your composite volcanoes, which are much more explosive, and the lava cools down much more quickly as it is much thicker and it sticks at the top of your volcano. Because we have our violent eruptions, which don't take place very often, that's going to create your layers, which create your shape much steeper compared to your gentle eruptions, which make a much more gradual shape on our shield volcano. So hopefully you should understand the differences between those volcanoes now and their formation, especially in relation to the plate boundaries they are found on. So we're now going to have a look at an exam question, so how you could be tested on the knowledge we have just been through. So what I want you to do, I want you to have a go at answering this question. So it is asking you to explain, so say why there is a difference between the type of volcanoes found on a divergent and a convergent plate boundary. The importance with this question is asking you why, and you just need to give one difference. So make sure you are explaining your point in your question here, developing that idea. Because it's worth 3 marks and it is asking you for one difference, this is something called a chain of reasoning question, which means you need to make 1 point for your first mark, and you then need to explain this and develop this idea twice. So give the clip a pause, have a go answering this question, and then we'll go through the mark scheme together. Okay, so let's have a look at this mark scheme. So the first thing to note here is, to get your first mark, you need to identify some point or some difference between the types of volcanoes. So at divergent plate boundaries, the volcanoes are less steep cone shape. So there's your first mark for saying it is a less steep. So you need to make sure here that you have comparative language. So here we've said that it is less steep. If you've just said that it is a gentle volcano, you wouldn't get the mark here because you need to have a comparing word such as less steep. You could talk about your volcanoes being gently sloped and then compare this to convergent and say convergent are much steeper, but you need some kind of comparison in this first point to note this difference. Then for the second mark here, you need to be able to explain why your divergent volcanoes are less steep, or if you've spoken about your convergent volcanoes being more steep. So this is due to the low viscosity or runny lava. So if you've written something about this is due to the lava being more runny, you can get the mark. So your explanation is here. You then, for your third and final mark, which is the most difficult one to get, need to explain why this runny lava will lead to a more gentle slope on your volcano, as it will travel greater distances before it solidifies. So there's lots of different options you can look at in your answer here. You might have spoken about the steeper slopes of your convergent volcano because you have a high viscosity or much thicker lava, meaning that it doesn't travel as far. You can get the mark there. You might have spoken about your frequency of your eruptions. So because the eruptions are more frequent, the lava is slowly building up over time, traveling greater distances, creating your shield shape. That's fine, but as long as you've developed your point twice, you can get the 3 marks for this question. Okay, so have a go, have a fix it of that answer, And if you need to go over and refresh your memory, go back to the start of this video and have another look at your types of volcanoes. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed the clip and found it useful for all your geography revision needs, please hit the like button below. If you want access to more content like this, more revision playlists, more exam technique and feedback, please subscribe to the channel. Regular content will be added and updated to help support you on your GCSE journey.